Good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to the Greasy Time Show. I'm your humble host, jdsimomusic, coming at you from the funky basement in the House of Grease, Nashville, Tennessee. We're going to have a great time tonight. I'm really looking forward to this one. It holds a special place in my heart. So, tonight, we're going to do a deep dive into my favorite, Mount Olympus, Mount Rushmore, whatever you want to call it, of guitar, Mr. Jimmie Vaughan. One of my favorites. One of the biggest influences on me ever, and continues to be. So we're going to start out, do a little lightning for you. Got some other surprises coming along the way, but we'll start off here because I think it's a good place to start. A little Latin boogie. Welcome to the show, everybody. We'll put that picture of lightning back up. Welcome. Oh, man. How's everybody doing out there? I'm doing really great. Had a wonderful week hanging out with my family. As usual, doing stuff down here in the funky basement. Trying to keep myself occupied in this strange time. We'll come back to the home screen. Ah, so good to be with y'all. Really excited about this one. I love doing all these, but this one in particular, like I said, holds a real special place in my heart. So before I get too far gone, I'll go ahead and throw the Groovy logo up and throw the tip jug information up at the bottom. PayPal and Venmo. I humbly thank you if you care to throw some stuff in the jug for old JD. I really appreciate it. So tonight, people ask me all the time, who's your favorite guitar player? Who's your this? Who's your that? All that kind of stuff. The same questions, and that's groovy, man. I appreciate people wanting to know such things. But there's, the truth of the matter is there's so many that I love and admire, and that means something to me. There's a lot in the contemporary world. I've talked about a bunch of them here on the show. I was just on the phone the day before last with my buddy Jimmy James from the Dove on Lamar organ trio, and we were talking about all types of old soul guitar players, from Cornell Dupree and Phil Upchurch and Curtis Mayfield to people like Little Beaver and oh God, who else are we talking about? Mighty Joe Young, obscure guys, and so anyway, there's people in the contemporary field, and there's obviously all the people I'll talk about on the show. But I will say this, and I mean this with all of my heart. There's a special place in my heart for who tonight's episode's about, and that's the great Jimmie Vaughan. And if I'm pressed on the subject of who is my favorite, I just say it's Jimmie Vaughan, because I'm not lying. And I'll get into more of, I want to talk about Jimmy's story. I've tried to compile some really cool unpublished photos from his years that I think are cool. And more importantly, I've compiled a pretty sizable amount of records and stuff of people that were big influences on Jimmy, and who, Jimmy introduced me to, and who have become huge influences on me thus far. And that's really something incredibly tangible that Jimmy has done for me. Is, his influence on me is great, but it's who he introduced me to and who he held in a high place, and talked about specific records and stuff like that, because that's how all this works. It's like the only I've said this before on the show, that it's like, the only way for one's music or art to have depth is for it to have depth. Meaning that you have a intrinsic deep value of lots of different things that are informing what it is that you're doing. It's not just a surface peripheral glance at a couple of things, or a deep understanding of one or two things. It's the collection of a myriad of different things all thrown into your collective, creative pot, as it were, and then hopefully you come out with something that's uniquely yours. And Jimmy is just an amalgam of all of that, and has been to a bunch of people, and there's a reason why, everybody that are like my friends, like peers of mine in the music business that I'm really close to, we all hold Jimmy in the same place, and there's a reason. So anyway, we'll talk all about that. I want to quickly, because I'm going to talk about a bunch of records tonight, and a whole bunch of stuff, and play a bunch of songs along the way. But I want to do a quick Records of the Week. It's going to be another all vinyl edition. I've got my records right here. So my first one that I want to talk about is somewhat relatable to, these first two actually are fairly relatable to Jimmie Vaughan. This right here is the very first Bill Doggett record. Bill Doggett obviously being one of the famous organ trio masters of the 1960s. This is his record Fingertips. This is actually the first Bill Doggett record that I ever bought a while ago, a couple decades ago. And this isn't necessarily one of his most famous, but it's the first one that I was able to find a long time ago, and it still holds a really, really wonderful place in my heart. And in particular, his version of Memphis on here is, you know, that the Chuck Berry song that Lonnie Mack also did, holds a special place in my heart. So anyway, you know, Bill Doggett, can't get enough of it, man. You know, and his combo, Fingertips. And there's actually another Bill Doggett record. This is a record that I got turned on to probably 10 years ago. This is a later era Bill Doggett record. This is the Honky Tonk Popcorn record. This is a funk record through and through. This is from later. Let's see here. I mean, I was turned on to it by a buddy of mine who knew I was into soul and funk and R&B and jazz and blues and all that. And this was made actually at the King Studios in Cincinnati, which I've talked about on the show before. King Federal, where all the Freddie King stuff was cut, and also where the early James Brown, like Please, 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 and Papa's Got a Brand New Bag and all that kind of stuff, was all cut at King Federal in Cincinnati, and it's actually still there. It's a bombed out building. I hopped the fence one time to take a look at it. It's all boarded up and stuff. They're going to try and make it into a museum, I guess. But anyway, this has been sampled a bunch in the hip hop world, this particular record, and the funk version of Honky Tonk in particular has been sampled a couple of times. But this is a great, great funky record that holds a special place in my heart as well. So we got two Bill Doggett records and another soul jazz record. I've been on a big Grant Green kick. I was able to find this awesome Blue Note reissue of Grant's First Stand. This is Grant Green's second record from the early 60s. And this has the great Babyface Willette on organ and Ben Dixon on drums. Babyface is a very underrated, awesome, you know, soul jazz organist from that era. But I love this record. I listened to this a bunch, and I did some stories on Instagram about this. But anyway, Grant Green, can't get enough of it. These next two are my contemporary choices for the week. This is another, I believe this is another Coal Mine record. This is The Undying Thirst by the Black Market Brass. This is an awesome horn band, soul, funk. I love these guys, big fan, and this is a great album. In keeping with a lot of the stuff that I've recommended before, like any of the Timian stuff, or obviously anything Daptone or Coal Mine related. But Black Market Brass is just a fantastic band, and I highly recommend it. And the last one is a record that's been out for a while, probably over 10 years at this point. But this is a favorite record of mine. This is the second record by the Menahan Street Band. This is The Crossing, came out 10 years or so ago. This is Tommy Brennick and Nick Mulshon and Homer Steinweiss, just guys I look up to an awful lot, the masters of modern soul and funk from Daptone. This is a great record, and I just ended up spinning this a bunch this week. So anyway, there you go. There's your records of the week, and I'm gonna do another song for you right now. This is transitioning into talking about the great Jimmie Vaughan here. I don't want to waste too much time because oh, you know what? I almost forgot. There's one last addition to the records of the week, and that is this just came out today, folks, on Spotify. But my good friend Johnny Moeller from the Fabulous Thunderbirds, he has a new band called the Sons of Tyrant, and they have a song called Space Dust Lightning. It's got a really funky, cool video. You should, on Instagram, follow them, and on Spotify, definitely follow them as well, and check out this new, it just literally just came out today, and it's really cool, and Johnny is a very good friend, and one of the baddest dudes around. So, sorry about that. I try and keep my stuff together, you know. So I'm going to play a tune right here. I'm actually going to pull in the microphone so I can do some singing. And this is a tune that is when I was 18 years old. Okay, I grew up here. I'll tell a story first, and then I'll do this song. So I was 18, and so, you know, as I've told on the show before, you know, I started playing when I was 4 or 5 years old, and it was all about Elvis, Scotty Moore, and Steve Cropper, and anything Stax related, were like the formative stuff of what I learned to play. And then that turned into like Reggie Young, Bobby Womack, Chips Moman, you know, because all those Memphis guys that were playing on all the stuff out of Memphis, you know, in the beginning I only knew Steve Cropper's name, but I would later learn who Bobby Womack and Reggie Young and Teenie Hodges were, and I've talked about all them on the show before. But then, you know, when I was, you know, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, you know, I, like many, growing up in the 90s, for the most part, you know, I heard Jimmie Vaughan, and I was blown away, and that was around the same time that I heard, you know, Cream and Jimi Hendrix, and, you know, I was also hearing the Red Hot Chili Peppers on the radio, and Pearl Jam, and Nirvana. You know, there was all this rock music as well, and also, like, you know, falling in love with the Beatles, and, you know, all that going on. And so I, henceforth, you know, in my early teens, I, like millions of others, was what I refer to as stratablasting, and that was kind of the kind of doorway into my teenage years of playing music and playing in bars and all that. And when I was 18, there were two pivotal moments that happened in my teens, and one I'll talk about another time because it also involves Austin, Texas, and it involves the great Stephen Bruton, who is another big hero of mine. Basically, you know, I was 16, 17 years old, and no, I was 16, and I opened for, and I was doing the full stratablasting routine, and I opened for Stephen at the Saxon Pub in Austin, and I thought, you know, I was pretty good, you know, and the crowd thought otherwise, and they were right. You know, I was doing the best I was capable of, but I didn't have any depth. I didn't have any seasoning. I didn't have, you know, I wasn't that good. I was just average. I was a barroom guitar player, and playing loud and playing fast. And Steven got up on stage and just handed me my ass in my hands and showed me what a real guitar player, what a real artist could be, with taste and tone and depth and space and all of the things that are hard, all the things that are the most difficult to learn and to grasp. So that started me sort of off on the path of sort of, you know, in getting into other types of music and starting to really dig deep. And then when I was 18 years old, I heard two records that completely changed my life. And one was the East West record, the Michael Bloomfield with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band record, which I talked about on last week's episode. And the other was Girls Go Wild, the first Fabulous Thunderbirds record. This record right here. Completely changed my life, completely. And so Gonna do a song from it. Gonna do a couple songs from it probably over the course of this episode, but I'm gonna do this one. All right. So this is the first tune I ever heard with Jimmie Vaughan, and that's all. This is it. I was just like, I'm in. Forever changed. Forever. So here we go. All right. A king, and I don't drive a big car. The tipsy woman was right, but she said I would go far. Just wait on time, baby. I'll be there one day. Well, and until I get there, baby, all I can do is hope and pray. Well, you say you stick with me through thick and thin, and I so glad that, baby, my bad luck has got to win. Just wait on time, baby. I'll be there one day. Well, and until I get there, baby, all I can do is hope and pray. Baby, stick with me through thick and thin, and I know someday, baby, my bad luck has got to end. Just wait on time, baby. I'll be there one day. Well, and until I get there, baby, all I can do is hope and pray. Well, I live the life I love, and I love the life I live. It's all I live, baby. It's all I have to give. Just wait on time, baby. I'll be there one day. Well, and until I get there, baby, all I can do is hope and pray. Yeah, you gotta wait on time, baby. You gotta wait on time, baby. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Be good to me, baby. Well, and until I get there, baby, all I can do is hope and pray. All right. Wait on time. Or as I would like to say, the gateway drug into loving Jimmie Vaughan. I've never played that before for people, ever. That's one of the more fun elements of doing this show for you guys is there's so many things that like I messed around with privately or whatever, but to actually do them for people is really fun. So hopefully it's good enough for a pass. So, all right, folks, let's get into it, shall we? So, the great Jimmie Vaughan, born in Oak Cliff, born and raised in Oak Cliff for the most part. You know, him and Stevie's parents, Big Jim and Martha. Big Jim was an asbestos worker. Now that is some old school freaking man shit right there. An asbestos worker. Good Lord. Man, that's some old school man shit there, boy. And so anyway, they moved around a lot when they were kids. I think they lived in Arkansas, they lived in East Texas, they lived in Louisiana. They moved around because Big Jim would, you know, his job would move him around. So Jimmie and his little brother Stevie, you know, they were kind of trained to be musicians, trained to kind of be loners and sit in their rooms and listen to music. And Big Jim, their daddy, loved what I would call probably the most popular form of music in Texas at the time. And that's Western swing music. Bob Wills, the Light Crust Doughboys, Ernest Tubb, Webb Pierce, all stuff that I know a lot about and have a lot of love for. You know, all that beautiful... stuff. And so they had a lot of that kind of music around their house and what was on the radio at the time. So in the early 60s, there was a lot of instrumental music. There was a lot of, you know, the Ventures, that kind of stuff, and there are also those Bill Doggett records I showed you. You know, Bill Doggett was really popular. Organ trios were really popular, and there was also a lot of acts from the region that weren't popular like nationwide, but were really popular right there. And one really important one was a band called the Nightcaps. They had a song called "Wine, Wine, Wine," that was incredibly popular, and all the bands in Dallas and Fort Worth in those days had to know that tune. And if you didn't play it, you couldn't get a gig, you know. Drinking wine, 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 drinking wine, wine, wine. That kind of garagey, kind of garage rock before garage rock even was really big. I mean, this is, you know, sort of like pre-Louie Louie, if you will, you know, the Kingsmen. So that was kind of the childhood thing. But then, of course, you know, Booker T and the MGs, you know, Green Onions and stuff like that started creeping in on the radio. And Jimmy Reed was a really big thing for Jimmy. I think Honky Tonk by Bill Doggett, you know, was the first thing Jimmy ever learned to play, you know. talks about that he played it wrong. I think he played it like, or something like that. But anyway, that was the first thing he learned, and he learned, Jimmy Reed, which obviously later he would become really close with Eddie Taylor, who he was really listening to on those Jimmy Reed records. And I'll talk more about Eddie Taylor again later. But nonetheless, all that bright lights, big city, bright lights, big city, gone to my baby's head. Bright lights, big city, gone to my baby's head. All that stuff, Jimmy started really getting into all that. And but also, the rock music of the time, Yardbirds and all that kind of stuff. Jimmy, by all accounts, and I'm friends with a lot of people that knew him back then, said that he took to it really quick, and that he very quickly was like the baddest dude around, and that he was cool too. That he had this coolness that still kind of exudes from the cat. And so he formed, or he didn't form, he joined. He had bands when he was younger. There was a band that he was in when he was like 13 years old or so. There in Oak Cliff, which incidentally in Dallas, keep in mind Oak Cliff is where Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested at the movie theater right around the corner from where the Vaughns lived. Nick, if you're watching, Mr. Gesson. And Oak Cliff is also where T-Bone Walker is from. And it's kind of a rough, working class, it's a working class neighborhood. Definitely not highfalutin. And there was a club on Jefferson Avenue which runs right through Oak Cliff, which is where the Texas Theater is, where Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested. There was a club there that Jimmy and two of his school friends had a band that played a residency there when he was like 12 or 13, and that was like the first real gig he'd ever had. And he was making like $50 a week in the early 60s for a little kid, playing guitar already. So word got around, and there was a band in Dallas of guys that were a few years older than Jimmy called the Chessmen. And the Chessmen were like a local teen, awesome, little garage band, and featuring a guy by the name of Doyle Bramhall singing and playing drums. And here's a really great unpublished photo. Jimmy is over there in the red shirt on the right. That's him with his first good electric guitar, his old Telecaster, and that's Big Doyle singing and playing drums. And they were local celebrities in Dallas, in Fort Worth. They opened for everybody that came through town. The famous story of Jimmy opening for Jimi Hendrix, that was with this band. And there's a really good friend of mine that grew up there and knew all those guys and was playing around him. And he told me that he's like, you have to understand. He's like, when Jimmy was 16 years old, all the dudes wanted to be him, and all the chicks wanted to sleep with him. And already at 16 years old, he was like, he was a star, And so he played, that continued, and the 60s continued to happen, obviously, and Jimmy eventually leaves home and seeks refuge in Austin, like many people from that area, and just seeking a place where they can not have to play the top 40 stuff in Dallas. That's what a lot of them sort of talk about, is that you had to play what was on the radio in Dallas, and these guys were wanting to do their own thing, and Austin then, even more so than now, but especially back then, was it's always referred to as like a little San Francisco sort of a scene where, you know, it was completely isolated from the rest of Texas in that it was this very hippie, free type of place. And so he moves down there, and there was a club. There were several clubs that were already kind of going strong down there. One of them is a place called the Vulcan Gas Company. This is an old 13th floor elevators poster I found, and that was what was going on. There was this this kind of hippie, you know, movement, and then there was like the Cosmic Cowboy thing going on. And Jimmie talks about bands like the 13th Floor Elevators and the Cockaroo, and you know, obviously people like Willie Nelson and Greasy Wheels and all that. But then you also had like clubs like the Armadillo World Headquarters, which was a bit bigger, that like Freddie King was playing, and there'd be these bills that were sort of like the Fillmore bills of the day, where you'd have you know, Frank Zappa and Freddie King and, you know, Waylon Jennings or something to that extent, you know, these really eclectic, awesome bills, you know. It was a really happening place. And so, obviously the community in Texas at the time included a lot of legendary people who've gone on to really do a lot of things. One of the few people that actually moved down around similar to the same time as Jimmie is the great Denny Freeman. Here's an old picture of Denny playing at the old Soap Creek Saloon. They had a band together. Jimmie's band at the time was a band called Storm. It originally was called Texas Storm, or it might have been called Texas Storm later. I don't remember, but it was the Storm, Texas Storm, that whole thing. And Denny was in that band, as I think Big Doll was too. And they played places like the Vulcan Gas Company, and there was a club that is now called Stubbs that has a big outdoor amphitheater, but the club portion of Stubbs used to be called the One Night. They all used to play there too. Here's an old photo of Paul Ray playing the One Night back in those days. And Paul Ray obviously would go on to have a band called the Cobras with Denny Freeman and with Jimmie's little brother Stevie. And Paul was also another Dallas transplant down to Austin. And here's a great photo I found of a very young Jimmie hanging outside of the One Night. And the lady to his left is Angela Straley, who would go on to do lots of stuff with Stevie in particular, and also would be the original manager of the Antones Club, and is one of the finest female blues singers of her generation. So that sort of brings us up to you know, a very important moment in kind of American music history, which is, you know, a guy by the name of Clifford Antone, who is from an exporting family from Port Arthur, Texas, who was just obsessed with blues. He meets all these people. Here's an old photo of Clifford on the left there, and that's him with Pine Top Perkins and Sunnyland Slim. Clifford originally, I think it was an old clothing store he had, and all these guys sort of at the same time, Jimmie being kind of the focal one of them. You know, they grew up loving all these different types of music and loving rock music and kind of going through the whole hippie thing with fuzz tones and all that. And then Jimmie in particular, like, he made a conscious decision at a certain point where he was like, that's it, I ain't playing no more rock and roll, I'm playing blues. And it became a really big, like, stake in the ground thing of like, I'm not fucking playing rock and roll. I'm playing blues, and I'm gonna get in it. And so people like Derek O'Brien and Denny and Big Doyle and a handful of others used to hang out at Clifford's old clothing store, and they used to play music back there, and that's where Clifford got the initial idea about, what if I had a club? Because Clifford was just fanatical and about this music, and there wasn't really there was all this incredible talent there, but there wasn't really an outlet for it. There were clubs, but they weren't catered to this kind of music per se. And so Clifford decides to open the original Antone's Club on 6th Street, and now 6th Street has become like Austin's Bourbon Street, or here in Nashville we have Broadway. Back when Clifford opened his original club there, there were nothing but porno theaters and shoe shine parlors and liquor stores, and it was not a place you went to go hang out. And so, obviously there's a lot of things that play into, a city and its sort of, its story, but I would, say that, Clifford opening that club, is what kind of changed things in the city of Austin. And he wanted it to feature blues and jazz and R&B, but he wanted it to be Blues Club. It was important to him. And so he opens a place in Clifford. It's actually their 45th anniversary this year, Antone's. And if you're not hip, go. They have the Antone's Record Shop in Austin, which the original drummer from the Fabulous Thunderbirds, Mike Buck, is one of the owners, and I occasionally buy records from them, and other little things, and also Big Henry's Gifts, which is the gift shop inside the new Antone's, the current incarnation of Antone, also has really cool records and stuff like that as well. So please feel free to support them and go and peruse, because I'm sure you'll find something that you like and think is cool. But in any rate, Clifton Chenier opened the place, and Clifford just went crazy, man. He got every great bluesman to come down and play his club, and would overpay him. Let's just say Clifford had an ecosystem of non-legal means to sort of take care of the bills, and he would give all that money away. He would keep the club going, and he would give, these guys would come from Chicago, and he would give them thousands of dollars in cash, and give them good liquor, and treat them like a king, and put them in a nice hotel, and make sure they were well taken care of. Again, wink, wink. And that afforded all the people that were there to have first-hand contact with the real guys from Chicago, mostly. And so Jimmie and the Fabulous Thunderbirds, which Jimmie, over a period of time, puts together his ideal band. He meets a guy named Kim Wilson. Kim was actually originally in town hanging out with his little brother, Stevie. But then Kim saw Jimmie play and went, that's who I want to play with. And the rest is history. They formed this incredible band, and they became the house band. And because of that, they backed up and learned and became close and became sons, if you will, to the best of the best. Here's a great photo of them, the original Thunderbirds. And that's actually Otis Clay on drums back there next to Kim. That's them with the great Eddie Taylor, who I talked about earlier. And Eddie Taylor obviously backed up Jimmy Reed. So all of the know, that kind of all that is Eddie Taylor. And Eddie Taylor taught Freddie King how to play, and Magic Sam. And so Jimmie took a lot from Eddie Taylor, and Jimmie is quick to sort of talk about that, like, you know, obviously he grew up loving Freddie King, and obviously this is one of the records that I love the most. This is all of the instrumentals from the King Federal days, you know. All that stuff. Or I fucked it up. Anyway, all that stuff was obviously a really big influence on Jimmie, and getting to know Eddie Taylor later, you know, that's where it came from. You know, a lot of what became part of Freddie's style came from Eddie Taylor. And another guy that they got to know really, really well is one of the guy in the middle of this photo, Jimmie Rogers. So from left, that's James Cotton, and that's Sonny Boy Williamson, Jimmie Rogers, Muddy Waters, and that's Otis Spain. So that's Muddy's like all-star band. Well, Sonny Boy Williamson hanging out with them, as it were, you know. But Jimmie was the original band leader for Muddy Waters, and Jimmie, again, it's the way that I kind of equate. You know, and I talked about this in a previous episode, but I sort of equate Jimmie Rogers and Eddie Taylor as being like the right hand, left hand, because these are the guys that were the original guys in Chicago that taught everybody that came after them. Okay, so, you know, sort of the whole concept of vibrato. Kind of originates with these guys. This is before B.B. King was doing it. B.B. was making records, but B.B. was playing very sort of T-Bone Walker-esque. And actually, I do want to bring this up. This record right here, the Singin' the Blues record, is a big influence on Jimmie. And the phrasing of this record, that whole thing, that whole... So that sort of single line playing was a big influence on Jimmie, but that sort of vibrato of Jimmie Rogers and Eddie Taylor, and of course later by Freddie King, makes up a big part of him as well. Okay, and so those are things that you know, the makeup of Jimmie. You know, I think of Eddie Taylor, Jimmie Rogers, I think of Freddie King, I think of early B.B. King, not Live at the Regal B.B. King. Very different. You know, I've talked about this before, but, you know, not... it's that single line, you know. It's all that. And it took me forever to realize that, because I'd always hear Jimmy talking about B.B. King, and I'm like, I don't hear B.B. King and you're playing, man. And then I heard the Singing the Blues record, and I was like, oh my God, there it is. There's that playing. There's that phrasing. So anyway, that's a really important one. Other guys that I hear in Jimmy's playing as well is there's a really important record that was a big record for Jimmy, and it was this record right here. It was the Big Bill Hill Live at the Copacabana record, and this record features Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Willie Dixon, and Sonny Boy Williamson, but the lead guitar player on this is a very young Buddy Guy. I've talked about this record before on this show, but this is a really important record. Because there's a not necessarily a phrasing thing that I hear from Buddy's playing on that record, because Buddy, the way Buddy plays on that record, he doesn't play like on any other record I've ever heard Buddy Guy do. And I love, especially like A Man and His Blues, from 66, 67. I'm not a fan of later, like current era or anything from the 90s or anything, Buddy Guy. I like, the older stuff. I don't like it when it gets all rock and roll. I don't dig it. But that record in particular, there's a fire, there's a... There's an intensity that he plays with on that record that's really raw and really beautiful. And also hearing him back up Muddy and Wolf and all that, and hearing that interplay is really beautiful. And that was a big influence. So the tone, really, you can hear, oh, that's where Jimmy got that sort of approach to tone from. And those are the main things. And then I talked about, Lightnin' Hopkins early in the show. Lightnin' Hopkins is definitely a big part of Jimmy. And, there's a million other, very intrinsic type players that influenced him, like Ike Turner. No one ever really talks about Ike Turner, but like especially the records from the 50s. Again, it's a very raw kind of style that is a big part of his playing. Which what's a good example? Like. That's an old Ike Turner instrumental. And then, so all that kind of single note stuff, it's not like there's space in it, and it's that kind of the placement of where things are that's just so funky and cool. And so, there's a couple, I'm dipping all around the place, and I hope I'm speaking coherently, folks. I'll tell you what, I'm going to take a break and play you another song, and then we'll come back and sort of pick up. I'm going to do a song right now that is probably my favorite song that the T-Birds ever did, and this is actually an old Lil Millet song from the 50s, Specialty Records, little 45 of this song, and from what I've been able to gather, I think Mike Buck the original drummer for the Fabulous Thunderbirds, suggested them doing this song. But it's my favorite, and it goes like this. I'm going to try and do this some justice, so give me a second, all right? Tell you a story, folks. You know, I don't care that COVID's happening. Cause I'm alright. Cause I got my woman. Got a woman with plenty of money. She got the money and I got the honey. Call my baby late last night. She told me, Daddy, everything was alright. She's real fine, yeah. I know my baby, she's a man on mine, give me a Cadillac and diamond ring. She told me, Daddy, don't you worry about a thing now. She's all mine and I'm so glad. She's the best woman that I ever had, yeah. She's a man
the Creoles. So
Artist that originally did that song down in Louisiana. That's a song from the first Thunderbirds record. It's one of my favorite songs they ever did. I love that song. That awesome bass line that the great Keith Ferguson is playing on that record. Woo! Can't get enough. So, the point being is we come here to, the mid-70s, late 70s. Antone's is going strong. On a weekly basis, you have the creme de la creme. B.B. King, Ray Charles, well, maybe not Ray Charles. B.B. King, Bobby Blue Bland, Albert King, Clifton Chenier, Fats Domino, Eddie Taylor, Hubert Sumlin, just Sonny Land Slim, Albert Collins, just the who's who, okay? And who's right there soaking it all up and backing them all up and them all teaching? Jimmie Vaughan. Jimmie was the baddest of the bad and the one that everybody wanted to be like. He was the king, man. And right around that same time, the Thunderbirds were revered in the scene and looked up to as like the best band. And they were also the first band to kind of get a record contract, And so they signed their first deal with Tacoma, and they made that incredible record, Girls Go Wild, that I talked about, that changed my life. And, that record, it didn't really sell that well, but they started touring out of the state more, and certainly by the time they made their second record, What's the Word, which is equally as great, they started going to Europe. They started doing some stuff on television over in Europe. They started getting exposed, and, unlike everything else that was going on, here's these guys from Austin, Texas, that were playing the low-down, real thing. They weren't playing rock and roll, because that's the thing, man. It's like, I love rock and roll. I love it, whether you're talking about, like, whatever version of rock and roll you want to talk about, I'm in. But there's blues and there's rock and roll. And people, they talk about blues, rock, and all that kind of stuff. I'm not really a fan of that. I like blues, I like rock and I like blues. And there are some exceptions to the rule, of course, but for the most part, I like, when it comes to blues, I like blues. And blues is hard, man. Blues is really hard to play right because it's so simple at times that it's like all you have is that person and everything they've been through coming through simple lines. It's naked music. It's not flashy. And to really kind of get inside it, takes a lot of effort and take a lot of nuance. And it's hard, man. It's easy in a lot of ways. And I'm here to tell you, like, it's easy to do something flashy. Because it generally, it's like you add some muscle memory and some repetition into the equation. And it's like, even if you want to do something technically impressive or something like that, it's like, if you practice it enough, you'll probably at least get most of it, if not all of it. But this stuff is the stuff that it's like, it's not about repetition at all. It's about living. It's about experience. It's about letting your personality completely come through in what you're playing. It's about restraint, which is probably the hardest thing for a musician to learn. It's about humility in your instrument. It's about truly, it's not about using the instrument as like a grandiose statement. It's about using it as a vulnerable tool to channel your life experience through. And it takes a lifetime of living. It takes, to really kind of do that correctly. And Jimmie, even when he was young, just like Michael Bloomfield before him, he studied at the feet of the real ones, and he exemplifies it in every way, and it's what I want to be like, I want to when I, years from now, I hope I can at least have some glimmer of it, because that's what I want to be like. I want to be like all those guys. And Jimmy continues to inspire that. So the Thunderbirds become kind of cult favorites in the late 70s and early 80s. This is a photo of them playing a little club, and that's actually with their second drummer, Frank Christina, who they took from the Roomful of Blues. That's still old Keith Ferguson over there on the right side, and Jimmy playing behind his head. I think this is from like 1981, 80 or 81, something like that. Around the era of the second record, What's the Word? And so the thing that's happening right around this time, 1979, 1980, 1981, the Thunderbirds opened for the Rolling Stones, Santana, Bob Dylan falls in love with them. Like, all of these influential, like, musicians, Eric Clapton falls in love with them, and this is all before Stevie, his little brother, becomes what he becomes. Jimmy was, like, these records that the Thunderbirds made in the early days did not sell that many, okay? But they found their way into the record collections of some of the most influential musicians in the world. And they went, whoa, this is incredible, okay? And it changed things. And especially in the blues world, all of a sudden you had scores of bands sort of copying the T-Birds, like dressing like them, and with the same lineup, sort of, and, it became a thing, and obviously they went on to make the Tough Enough record, which was a top 10 single, like on the pop charts, which is incredible, that a band of this, like, insane niche kind of thing was able to have a mainstream pop hit. They were hugely popular, like, an arena, or at least a large theater or bigger selling act on their own. Obviously, as his younger brother became what he became, them together would be this incredible bill of music that would fill huge places, but they were a big act on their own. And obviously, Jimmy was to go on to leave the Thunderbirds to make the Family Style record with Stevie. Unfortunately, Stevie was, tragically taken from this planet horribly after the show in Alpine Valley with Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, and his brother. And Jimmy, he hit around for a while. He didn't play, he didn't make public appearances, and finally, after a few years, came out at the insistence of Eric Clapton to do the Albert Hall shows in 92 or 93, whatever it was. Might have even been 94, I don't remember. And that forced Jimmy to sort of put a band together, and he put a band together with Denny Freeman, who I mentioned earlier, and George Raines, and Lou Ann Barton, who, incidentally, Lou Ann Barton, a famous, blues singer from Austin, she was the original singer in the Fabulous Thunderbirds. Jimmy made his first solo record, Strange Pleasure, which was very successful. And all of a sudden, Jimmy can sing. It's like, what the hell is this? Because up to this point, Jimmy's never sang on any of these records. He's just this badass guitar player looking cool and playing awesome stuff. And I like Jimmy singing a lot, because he doesn't sing what he can't sing. Can you dig it? Like, there's nothing worse than a musician or a singer trying to sing or play something they can't sing or play. And Jimmy uses what he's got the best he can, and it's groovy, man. And I dig it. And there's great songs on this. And right around this time, Jimmy, a long-standing thing in Jimmy's solo band has been the use of an organ player playing bass without a bass player. And obviously first is, the the great Bill Willis, who was a staff bass player back in the 60s at King Federal in Cincinnati, folks. That thing I already mentioned. He played bass on Hideaway for Freddie King. And I think he was playing with Laverne Baker, if I'm not mistaken, and Jimmy stole him. And he's like, I want you in my band. And so for all of the 90s into the 2000s, you know, the core of his band was Bill Willis and George Raines. And, of course, nowadays, he's got the great Mike Flanagan playing with him, who's fantastic. Just in the last year or two, you know, he put out the Live at Seaboys record, which is the Jimmie Vaughan organ trio with Flanagan. And originally it was Frosty playing drums. And then it was George Raines, and now it's, I believe, Rudy Album's playing drums. But anyway, you know, again, I mentioned earlier, Bill Doggett. Yeah, baby. Gotta love Bill Doggett. He never goes away. So, and that brings us, you know, into the current time frame where, you know, Jimmy is this elder statesman. You know, he's become the guy that, he's become what all those other guys were. He's the elder statesman. And, you know, I'm grateful because, you know, I never got to see B.B. King in his prime in the 60s or 70s, you know. I never got to see Freddie King, you know. I never got to see Lightnin' Hopkins. I never got to see Johnny Guitar Watson. I never got to see Frankie Lee Sims. I never got to, you know, I never got to see these guys. But I've got to see Jimmy multiple times. And it's the personification of all of that distilled down into this funky, tasteful, you know, very heartfelt thing that I think all, at least, you know, all players that I love aspire to be like, you know. And I'm grateful that he's in the world making great music, and I'm grateful that he's turned into what he's turned into, this amalgam of all of this great American music that he just has so, you know, sopped up like a sponge. So what I want to do in closing is sort of go through some of these records one last time of some of these important people, because really the most important thing that Jimmy has done for me, I mean, I love these records and I love him and I love his playing, but he turned me on to all these people, you know. It was him talking about them that made me investigate these records and these artists that I'm about to talk about. And that's changed my life. I mean, not only did it change my life when I heard him play, but all this other stuff. And that's what it's supposed to be about, folks. That's what it's about, you know? It's a groovy thing, man. So, the Singin' the Blues record, B.B. King. Gotta love it. Let's Hide Away and Dance Away, Freddie King. This right here, the complete Aladdin recordings of Lightnin' Hopkins. Okay? This right here, this is a great record right here. This is the best of the modern years of Johnny Guitar Watson. So all of that, like... playing from the 50s, from when he was on Modern. This is a great, all these are on Spotify, by the way. And then this one, in the same breath, the Boogie Ramble Blues of Clarence Gatemouth Brown. There's a lot of Gatemouth Brown in his playing. And in that same sort of stankiness, you know. of stuff, that open string stuff that's just real stanky. And then this one right here, which nobody talks about Frankie Lee Sims enough. Frankie Lee Sims was actually a cousin of Lightning Hopkins, and you can kind of hear it. They play very similar. Stuff, very Lightning Hopkinsy, but it's a little more distorted. And then obviously Eddie Taylor. You know, this is a really good collection called Bad Boy that has some really great live and studio recordings, and they're the good ones. They're the ones you want, you know. And you know, the Big Bill Hill blues from the Copacabana record. You're probably going to have to hop on Discogs or something like that to find a good copy of this. It's a hard record to find, but it's really important and a great record to have. So in any rate, you know, I love Jimmie Vaughan. Big fan. He changed my life. He changed all our lives. Just some other great photos I found. Here's him at the old Antones playing with Buddy Guy. This is the Guadalupe location in the early 80s. This is a great photo of Jimmy and Muddy Waters. Muddy loved Jimmy like a son. And Muddy referred to Kim as the best harmonica player since Little Walter, which that's pretty incredible. That's a pretty insane compliment to get. This is from that same show. That's a very young Luann Barton. And Bob Mongolian playing guitar. That's the original Antones right there. And here's the Thunderbirds opening set that night, that very same night. That's Jimmy and Kim and Keith Ferguson and Otis Clay back there playing drums, and that's Angela Straley singing with them. And oh man, I could talk about this stuff forever. It's just as you can tell, folks, I hope it comes across how close it is to my heart. So, in any rate, check those records out. Obviously, Jimmy continues to make great music, and you know, I've had the chance to be around him a few times, and it's a great thrill. I'm not a starstruck person. I've talked about, like, you know, hanging out with Paul McCartney that afternoon and stuff like that. You know, I've been really fortunate to meet some incredible people in my life and be around heroes of mine. But you know, I gotta say, you know, being around Jimmy is different. You know, because he holds a place that few people do. You know, he's up there with the greats of the greats. And so, in any rate, I've got a new track, as always, that I'd like to debut for y'all tonight. This is sort of in keeping with the theme of Jimmy. This is an instrumental that came up with Adam this week, and it's sort of a cross. There's sort of a Jimmy influence and an Earl Hooker influence. You know, it's me just doing what I do, you know, within the confines of the idiom, and it's called "You're on the List." So check it, coming right at you, world premiere right now. See you in a minute. there you have it, folks. So I'm going to break rank tonight. I usually just talk right now, but I'm actually going to play you one last song because it feels like the right thing to do to kind of close this episode down. I hope you've enjoyed it. This has been a really fun fanboy night for me. I mean, it always is. I feel like, every week I have this opportunity to just share all the things that I love with all of you, and hopefully I get to, entertain you somewhat. But this one's definitely special. So, God bless you, Jimmy. Thank you for changing my life, and just want to be like you if I ever can grow up. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in again. Thank you for continuing to subscribe to my YouTube channel, jdsimomusic. Thank you for following my Facebook page and liking my Facebook page and following my Instagram account, jdsimomusic. If you haven't done any of those things, please do them all. I would be greatly appreciative of it. My new single, One of Those Days, is out. Please listen to it and stream it on Spotify. And my new record comes out August 21st. I'm really excited about. There's a bunch of stuff coming up for that. And there's also some talk of maybe doing something with some of these instrumentals that I've been doing for the show here. And more about that to come. Maybe some updates next week. So as usual, obviously, folks, if you care to contribute, I try to put a certain amount of effort into trying to put together a good show for you folks. So if you care to throw some stuff in the tip jug, I really appreciate it, and I'm very humbled by it. So thank you. The information's down below there on the screen. And I'm going to do a song right now from Strange Pleasure, Jimmy's first solo record. This is one of the first songs of Jimmy's that I ever heard in my life when I was younger, because of its connection to his younger brother. And it's a poignant thing. And, one of the things, that's interesting is, you have these two guys. You have Jimmie Vaughan and you have Stevie Ray Vaughan. You have these two guys two brothers who completely changed the way that the guitar is played and influenced millions of people, both in different ways. Stevie influenced the world in a very mainstream way, myself included. And Jimmie obviously influenced Stevie. There's a ton of Jimmie and Stevie. It's pretty remarkable. In certain ways, Jimmie downplays the things that Stevie took from him. But it's there, and you can hear it in certain things. Certain things are flashing across my mind, and I can hear them. But nonetheless, they were brothers. They loved each other, and it's an emotional thing because people, a lot of people throughout the world want to talk to Jimmie about his dead little brother, and that's his baby brother, he misses him every day. There isn't a day that goes by that he doesn't think about him, and it's a horrible tragedy. And God bless him for picking up his life and trying to do the best with it, because I can't imagine what that must have been like for him to go through and continue to go through year after year, day after day. A lot of respect and a lot of love. So I'll do this tune in the style of Lightnin' Hopkins, and then we'll say goodnight. guitar on his back. Ain't gonna cut the angels no slack. See the voodoo child holding out his hand. I've been waiting on you, brother. Welcome to the band. They're blues stringing, heaven fine singing. Jesus, man, Joseph, be listening to them playing. Lord, they call another blues stringer back home. Up there, but in Lightning too. Albert King and Freddie playing blue. T-Bone Walker, Guitar Slim, Little Son Jackson, and Frankie Lee Sims. Lord, they call stringer back home. Lord, they call another blues